right. Guys, thank you for joining us today for our regional meeting and the first one of 2022. We're fortunate to have Jett Britnell, who is the new president of the Canadian chapter of the Explorers Club, join us. He's going to give us a little bit of introduction. Being out of BC, we might not all be familiar with him. If you weren't able to attend today, we hope that you'll watch the presentation following this, which is going to be recorded and on YouTube. Jeff Britnell, FY16, is the Explorers Club Canadian Chapter Chair. He's a professional underwater wildlife and expedition photographer, explorer, and writer based in British Columbia. In 2016, scuba diver Ocean Planet magazine named him one of the 122 inspiring shooters you should know. A member of the esteemed Ocean Artists Society, Jett is also clearly a fellow of the Explorers Club, the Royal Geographical Society, the Royal Canadian Geographical Society as well. Jett has over 50 magazine cover sheets to his credit, no small feat, and his images and editorial is published internationally in various media. Jett also co-authors an online column under the banner Third Age Expeditions for Luxbeat magazine with his wife, Catherine Britnell. Please feel free to follow up with myself, Robin Brooks, after the presentation. And I'm going to pass it away to you, Jett. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Robin. Hi, Al. It's great to be here. And thanks for this opportunity. What we'll do first is we'll do a brief overview of some of the ideas we have for the Canadian chapter for 2022. We met a couple of weeks ago on a Zoom call with the Canadian executive to kind of kick out some ideas. And so we'll go through that and then we'll have a break for a Q&A, and then we'll get into the body of my main presentation of some of the work I've done editorially. So I'm just going to have to turn off my video here for a second to get into the keynote. Just hang there. It would help if I shared the screen.
We're in business.
Okay. You got it? Hello?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, on early January, I was involved in the board of directors meeting at HQ. There's a few items, not too much happening. There's great anticipation for ECAD on April 23rd, and at that time it was practically sold out. There's about 1,000 seats this year. So that's highly anticipated. The HQ is undergoing a $6 million renovation at the moment, and they're hoping to have that resolved. And I think this again underscores the benefit of us having a deal with Discovery Channel, because if we had not done that at the time as a club, we would be probably in some financial trouble right now. On Monday night lectures, many of you may have seen those on Facebook. They are interested in hearing from any chapter members who would like to present. So you're to contact Kevin Murphy if you have a topic you'd like. If you need an introduction from me as a chapter chair, I'm happy to do that as well. So just reach out to us if you have any desire to do that. So the Canadian chapter is the largest international chapter, and we're the fourth largest in North America. And we are going to see a drop off in some members in the coming month or so. That's primarily due to non-payment of dues. And they've been very patient and accommodating to help people along throughout this period if they had trouble paying during the pandemic. But it's reached a point where some of the people that have not paid dues haven't even responded to inquiries. So they're going to be having a bit of a terminations happening. What I would ask is that we continue to grow as a chapter, sponsor somebody, refer them to the membership committee if you know of anybody who might be a potential member. on the good news. Last week on the BC chapter call, Geneva had 4 new people this month come in. I think there's one other that I saw in the works. So, very good, strong growth from BC right now, which is great to see. One of the things, the initiatives we're looking at for 2022 was to increase the value to the chapter members. And that's open to interpretation, but some of the feedback I've heard over the years from people, particularly out in BC, where we're so far away from New York, is that they're paying the dues, but they're not seeing what they're getting for it. So that's one of the things we're looking at and trying to add a little bit more value for the Canadian chapter members. One is to increase chapter revenue. We're probably about $1,300 in the kitty. We received some funds from HQ for adding some new members. But the reason we need the additional funds, I think, is to help support some public presentations and events. For example, I did a large presentation at the Vancouver Aquarium when I was the BC Regional Director a few years ago. And that required a cash outlay of about $1,000 up front. And we recouped that money later through ticket sales. So going forward, what I would like to consider is that if, for example, Toronto wanted to put on a large presentation of that scale, that we would be able to advance the money through Robin to secure the venue and the podiums and event insurance, which we need, speaker gifts, honorariums, that sort of thing, so that Robin's not having to pay out of pocket to fund that right up front. So that's one part of it. Regional events and Zoom meetings. Normally the chapters would like to run about one event a year or more. I know in Toronto you've had get-togethers, more social get-togethers, but given the varying levels of COVID restrictions we've all faced, Zoom meetings seem to be the way probably for the next 4 or 5 months. We'll see where things are then. So we're going to continue that way. We will be considering some volunteer committees from the membership. One is we're looking at a website rebuild right now. You would have seen it in the recent newsletter. So we're looking for somebody that might have website building expertise. Again, we don't have funds to pay for this, so we're looking for volunteers. But we will, I have some website building knowledge, but it's not something I wish to take on at the moment with the other things I have going on. But we certainly have a committee starting to form with Marliese and Roger and myself, and we might add another member from the executive, but certainly looking for volunteers within. So if you know of anybody that has website building expertise, please send them forward. We're also looking at trying to add chapter branded t-shirts, coffee mugs, etc. Even a club pin, a club patch. The idea behind this is that if we basically get a logo t-shirt, we arrange an outsourcing for that, so that the entire order fulfillment would be by this other entity, and we would just merely make our return on investment for that. So they would take the order, do the shipping. Nobody in the Canadian executive has to touch anything other than the treasurer who receives the money as it comes in from the vendor. So that's something we're exploring. We don't have anyone nailed down just yet. Robin just came up with a great idea today about approaching Telia and Durables for a product. So we're going to entertain discussions on that. So basically, we're looking at a lot of different things. It just takes time and conversations to happen. But at this point, the Canadian executive is very much on board with trying to move down these paths, and we'll see where it takes us. One of the initiatives that I did when I was the BC regional director was I opened it up to the chapter members that if you want to be followed by the Explorers Club's social media, that would be on Twitter and Instagram, just follow their site and send us your Twitter and Instagram handles, and I will get that to the social media individual who handles all of the club's social media postings. The idea is that, hey, if you see an Explorers Club post, like it, share it amongst your followers. And likewise, if the social media director sees your posts and you've tagged the club in some way, they'll try to amplify that through the club as well. So it's really a follow for follow kind of arrangement. and the individual's club dues must be up to date before they'll accept that. But it's something I don't believe was open up to the rest of Canada at the time. So if you have people in Toronto that are not being followed by the Explorers Club, make that invitation to them, and we'll see where that goes. Because what we want to do is drive traffic as much as possible between ourselves and HQ. On the website rebuild, we were wondering, do we need to redesign the existing site or actually do a full rebuild? And that was a decision that was made. HQ recently had a rebuild on their website and looks quite nice and modern. Ours is looking a little tired and it's not really up to date in a lot of areas. But one of the things we're looking at doing is adding pages that would provide links to the Canadian chapter members' books and photography and artwork, etc. So if we have a member who has written a book, that they could have a link on there where people could go in and find them and actually order the book through their link. So it's another way to highlight the membership. Prospective new member page, really designed that we can, if you have somebody that's interested or expresses interest, that you just give them that page website address and they can go straight to it, and the process would start there. They can fill in a few questions, or at least would get that, and then she could take it from there. So again, this is all a kind of a aspirational work in progress with this, but we're looking at a lot of different things on this at the moment. Also like to provide a brief bio and web links for Canadian chapter members. It would have to be opt-in only because of privacy laws in Canada. But it's a way to think if somebody was looking for a Canadian explorer, we would like them to hit our site and look for them there first. And if they come in there and find out who the Canadian explorers are, then they have a way of making contact to them through their website. The other thing we would do is link the page in a better way to help drive traffic to the chapter's Facebook page. That's really our only social media channel. And I'm not inclined to want to get into Twitter and Instagram. While it would be nice, it's a lot of work to keep up. We would need people to actually look after that. And right now, the Canadian executive has got a lot on their platter, so it would require someone to come forward and say they're interested in doing that. And we could definitely explore it, but at this stage, it's really the Facebook page. We would encourage any members to, if they have news or fascinating articles, go in there and do a post. And we need to update the links in the website, make sure their content's recent. And that's going to probably require some volunteer web administrators to help Roger, who's our webmaster, Roger. And that, so we're looking at that as well to just try to keep it all going when many of us, we could be away, Roger could be away. We need someone to be able to go in there and just update things and make sure we're as current as possible. So to give you an example, I looked at the Texas chapter, and they have a drop-down menu. They have events, fundraising, explorers. So right in there, when you go to the explorers link, it lists some of their members. And they probably have the most extensive one I've seen. And when you follow Nancy's, it's almost like a page bio here with links to her websites and that sort of thing. Now to do this takes time. We'd have to come up with a template that the member would fill out, and then we'd have to have someone just have a look over, make sure it meets our criteria. But this is the kind of thing we're looking at trying to do with the new website to add some more value. In Great Britain, they've been branding some merchandise for a while. And they do have a club patch and a pin, and that's something that we'll be investigating. And the other thing that's been kind of interesting they've done is they have limited edition rum and scotch that they've partnered with a distillery over there. And this distillery actually underwrites some of their events that they're doing for sponsoring them. So they've got arranged a really nice business deal. It's a limited run, usually of about 100 bottles that they'll do a limited run on. So they take the orders in. Here's one you can see where they've got a pin, and inside that little folder is the chapter patch. And I've even seen one where they had a fold out listing some of the UK explorers. We can do something similar with Canadian explorers as sort of a promo item. So this is going to require some dialogue. The challenge we have in Canada is liquor laws, shipping product back and forth. We have to find a distillery that one wants to partner with us in some fashion, but also that they're able to ship across Canada. And the last item, not least, but one's considering a Canadian chapter flag. Norway has developed their own, and it's simply Norway chapter with their logo and the Explorers Club underneath. They currently have 3 flags. One is loaned out for expeditions. They're treating it much the same way that HQ does, although the requirements are not as stringent. And we do have expeditions and things happening in Canada that might not qualify for an HQ flag, but certainly from the Canadian chapter's perspective, it would be nice to get some photo ops out there and also give some Explorers Club shine to whatever the expedition is. And it could be a citizen science expedition. I know that HQ, one of the key things they look at for the flag expeditions are that there is science attached to the expedition in some fashion that will be documented in a large way. They're also, they have 2 other flags in Norway, which are owned by private members. They take them to the Explorers Club dinner, chapter events, any talks that are going on, they kind of bring it, I guess, put on a flagpole at those soirees. So the idea is we haven't talked about it at length with the Canadian executive as yet, but the idea is that we could explore this. I have no idea what they cost, but this is another reason why if we had some revenue, it gives us some options to consider doing some things like this. And the other thing we will be probably looking at is doing some kind of MailChimp survey of the membership once we determine the questions we would like to know that we would like to know from them. So that's another thing, so there's lots on the agenda. It's just all a question of time, and these are early days yet. The focus right now is on the website rebuild, and we're hoping we can get that started sooner than later. And right away start to see some uptake from the existing membership, because I think the greatest challenge we have as a Canadian chapter is engagement and trying to have our own Canadian chapter members be involved in what's going on. So anyone that's been disenfranchised or felt that way, we want to be able to bring them back in. And we also want to tap into their talent. And that might be in the form of using them on committees and getting them to participate more. Even though they're not sitting on the executive, doesn't mean they can't help contribute to operations within the club. So that's that in a nutshell. I'll just go back to video here. Okay, there we are. Any questions?
A quick one, Jett. Did we get our deposit from HQ for the activation incentive program yet?
Still waiting for that. We're going to give them, I think, this week, a couple of weeks to kind of get it together. So we'll be on their tail again. Ran into a snag about the banking. As you know, there was some challenge with transferring money, and we can't accept it in PayPal. So we're just waiting for them to issue a check. But at the time when we were going down that path, I think they had shut down in the office due to a COVID outbreak. So we're just kind of giving them a little time to get back together. But yeah, that's definitely, David's on that. I'm kind of got my eye on it as well. So we just said, let's give them another week or two, and then we'll get after them.
That's what David and I thought 6 months ago.
I know.
8 months ago, I think.
Yeah, well,
better late than never.
We just keep at it.
Yeah, it's all good.
That's a great walrus picture. Is that yours?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Fantastic.
I was up in Svalbard 2019. Did one of those polar expedition ships up there. It was fabulous.
Jett, thank you on what's going on in headquarters. And from the top, I think there's some exciting things in the works. I was maybe taking pictures and texting them to people at the same time.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so we'll move on to the main presentation. Just bear with me here. Okay, we up?
Okay. Good.
Yep, looks good.
So Robin came up with the adventures and misadventures. I don't know what that's about, but I went with it. So what I'm going to do is give you a little background as to how I got started and everything. And this was really Sea Hunt started all. It was a TV show that ran back in the from 58 to 61. I was seeing it in the early 60s. And it was one of these underwater adventure excitement shows, underwater detectives. So after watching, it was a Saturday afternoon. Backstory, this gas mask was my first scuba rig. What had happened, I've been watching Sea Hunt. We went to the county fair, and on a table, there was about 20 war surplus gas masks. And while other kids were asking for balloons and things like that, I begged my father to buy me a gas mask. And they were $2, which was a lot of money then. But he was perplexed why I would want it. I didn't know why. I just knew I wanted it. So he bought it for me. And it sat there for probably a week. And then Sea Hunt came on again on a Saturday morning or afternoon. I'm all by myself and watching this and decided, okay, that's why I wanted this. There's the goggles. There's a hose similar to what they had in the underwater scuba rig. And the canister had to be for air, is what I figured. I was 5 years old. And in our backyard, we had one of these big iron cauldrons as a garden feature. And inside that was filled with water and goldfish. And I grabbed this gas mask, went out there, figured, okay, I can do this. I can see underwater with this. So I had to heave myself up onto the edge of the cauldron and then duck my head in with the gas mask on. And right away, I could see the goldfish crystal clear. And then I even noticed on the bottom of the cauldron, the rust flakes from the iron and such, and crystal clear. And I'm just absolutely amazed. As I'm feeling all these things, the water's starting to seep in the side of the mask. But I was supremely confident, thinking, no worries. I've got a hose and a canister I can breathe air from. And eventually, of course, the mask flooded and I had to sputter. And nobody witnessed this other than myself. So it was really how I started as a young kid, cutting up garden hoses, getting scuba goggles or masks, going to pools. We used to use Coke bottles with garden hoses taped into them, trying to breathe off those. We had no idea what the garden hoses cost, but apologies to the neighbors. Anyways, the Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau was on TV in the late 60s. So usually on a Sunday night after Walt Disney or something, as this Nat Geo special. So I was always glued to this. I was the only one in my family that expressed interest in that. And I was fascinated by sharks at a young age. And this was a February 1968 copy Nat Geo, which I had at the time. I don't know where I got it, but I had it. And we used to do interest talks at school. We had to put on a presentation to the classmates. So I cut my copy up. I've since replaced it, but I put it on like a Bristol board and gave a talk on great white sharks and blue sharks and whale sharks and things like that. And this is a good 6-7 years before the movie Jaws came out. So I was really freaking my classmates out with this knowledge about great white sharks. But these were early days of trying to understand sharks. This actual issue was very much how they're dangerous predators and, are going to eat you if they get a chance. And over the next decade, the sensibilities about sharks changed. People started to embrace them, understanding they're part of the food chain. But back then, my heroes were the underwater photo pros model team of Hans and Lottie Haas, a married couple, and also Ron and Valerie Taylor from Australia. They were in many documentaries I saw at the time. And that became sort of my template that if I ever became a diver, this is what I wanted to do. This was the day I saw my first shark ever. Just been certified for about a year. We're off Hornby Island in British Columbia, and we saw these 6-gill sharks. We actually saw up to a dozen, and I stopped counting. And it was a very rare encounter to see so many in one dive. We actually had 2 days back to back like that. And so one of those moments that we never forget, I ended up meeting Ron Taylor at a presentation a few months later here in Vancouver and asked him about it. And he was absolutely fascinated, and all of a sudden zeroed down on me, was grilling me about 6-gill sharks. Everything you'd want in a boyhood idol, he was. Good man. I managed to get best day trip ever was going down to Seattle to the Diver Institute of Technology. We actually did a chamber dive in a recompression chamber down to 160 feet. So it's a simulated depth. And we also got to try on, this is a Japanese commercial hard hat suit, and jump into Lake Washington and walk around on the bottom for a little bit. Absolutely fascinating, very heavy. The weight belt I've got across my shoulders was about 75 pounds. And then you have that breastplate on your shoulders, which sort of presses down on you the whole time. But really a fascinating experience. I first got published in August '87 with Diver Magazine here in Vancouver. I had no prior writing experience really or training. I was self-taught as an underwater photographer. And the first story I wrote, right out of the gate, I got the feature, 4-page center spread, cover shot. So I was hooked early on. I thought, okay, I can do this. But I was really thinking, okay, that's the one-trick pony, like getting a #1 hit one time. But I went out and got every book I could from the library about magazine writing, how to write for magazines, the business aspects to it, and continued. And I was getting feature stories, cover shots, just about every time out of the gate. And I ended up with my first assignment, going to Vanuatu, which at the time in North America was a little known destination, or what certainly wasn't known to North Americans for diving. So we basically put this destination on the map at the time. And it was an upstart magazine out of Florida. And they actually, what they did at the Diving Equipment Manufacturers Show that year, they had reprinted the article and put all their media rates on the back. And that was the handout at the show. I could not have paid for that advertising. And that just led to more trips and assignments after that. I ended up working with Diver Magazine as a contributing editor, all part-time. During the daytime, I worked as a senior account executive in employee benefits, dealing with corporate sales to health and dental plans and that sort of thing. So I used to say that was a part-time job that got really busy. My real job was a photojournalist. And so I did this on weekends, holidays, evenings, whenever I could. This was Sport Diver Magazine in the US. At the time, is the first cold water cover they ever had published. And it was a feature story on British Columbia. And they also tied in the big animals with the big giant octopus that we have up here. So that was a bit of a coup. But a number of cover shots through the years. And on assignments, we were down in Indonesia. And this was literally just a grab shot coming back from a dive. But the resort just loved it. They used it in brochures and all kinds of promotions. But the idea behind it was, I tell people when they're trying to become a diving photojournalist is to shoot some topside images, because that helps tell the story. And really, that's all I did this for. I'm thinking editorially that I'll be able to use this in a story, but the resort really loved it. And we've been interviewed a number of times through the years. Always an odd thing to me, but it is what it is. It's part of the game. So it was in 2016 over dinner here in Vancouver. Susan Eaton was in town. She had become a friend, and Catherine and Susan and I went out for dinner. And somewhere in the middle of dinner, Susan blurted out that I must join the Explorers Club. And I kind of said, yeah, I don't think I have the credentials for that. And she said, no, I insist, you must join. So, okay, well, I'll look at it. And so I sat on it. I was sort of dragging my heels, and Catherine said, have you filled out that application yet? And I said, no. She said, you must do this. So I did. And the challenge I had was separating what I would deem exploration diving from dive travel writing that I wouldn't put in the exploration category because you're just going to a resort and talking about it. There was a lot that I didn't realize I'd amassed, going to places that nobody had been before, and discovering things nobody had seen before. So that was really good, how it happened for me. Got into the Explorers Club, went to the Royal Geographical Society next, and then the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. So if it were not for Susan, I would not be having this conversation with you right now, I don't think. And Susan heads up the Sedna Women's Epic Expedition, where they snorkel. They were doing snorkeling up in the Northwest Passage, but then they've kind of transitioned into doing educational outreach up there with the villages and helping the school children and things like that. But she knew I liked martinis and asked me to make a martini for the expedition. So we came up with an original martini. And then a year later, I came up with the global warming edition, which was less, had a little more slurry in it. So we had fun with it. And in 2016, I was recognized. I mean, if you keep at this long enough, you might get recognized. The thing with these acknowledgements, while they're very nice, I know 30, 40 other photographers could easily be on this list that weren't on it. So they are arbitrary to some degree, but it is an honor to be recognized, particularly when you've been at it for over 30 years. And the company in this particular magazine was quite esteemed, so I accept that. This was a different one. I was asked to do an underwater photographer's guide for British Columbia. So it was a bit of a long story for Dive Photo Guide, but they loved it so much, they ended up voting it one of the top travel stories of 2017. So they said, we never do this. We don't consider this, but they just loved it so much. So again, for someone who had no formal journalistic training, somehow I found my zone for this stuff. So with the Explorers Club, I was regional director in BC 2019, 2020. We actually, I guess the biggest moment of that was putting on an Explorers Talk evening at the Vancouver Aquarium. We had Phil Newton and as an amazing speaker. And it went over very well. I think 100 seats in the room. We did encounter, strange enough, some people didn't want to go to the aquarium because they were against aquariums, even though the Vancouver Aquarium has done a lot of work to transition as to be more of a rehab center. But something going forward to, if we had to do another one, we would not do it there just because of that reason. So on to Lux Beat Magazine. They approached me initially back in 2018 to do a column for them. So we came up with Third Age Expeditions, Travel Photography and Expeditions. And they love the diving stories. They just, it's a world they don't really understand. But what we were able to do with it was we were able to branch out and do things like on museums when we go places. And Gulet over in Turkey and Greece, we did a tour of one of these, went to a bunch of archaeological sites along the way. So did a long form story on it. Just a Mexican vacation. We went to all the ruins down there and were able to just write about it, which is a lot of fun. Up in Svalbard on an polar expedition cruise. How to gear up for a polar expedition cruise. So we kind of play around with it a bit. We spent an entire day in Oslo going to the museums and wrote about that. And then out of the blue, I decided I was going to put together one on martinis, and they absolutely love that. And I went back to Prohibition era and sort of talked about the history and things like that. It was a fun one to do. And just fall of 2020, my buddy and I went up to Pavilion Lake, which is, NASA was up there for over a decade studying the stromatolite. bites. It's a type of freshwater coral, they call it, but it's not coral. It's actually a living organism. And it most closely resembles the kind of life forms they think they will find on Mars. So that's why they spent a long time there. So a lot of fun things like that. Love doing tropical trips. Been all over the world at various places. This is actually the Philippines. And we're shooting one to document the marine life, but also editorially to write stories about, it might be about the resort or destination or about the marine life itself. And this was Indonesia at clownfish, Finding Nemo. And it ends up, this is how it ends up getting used. The stock agency actually sold it to a puzzle company one year. So it's when you nail these kinds of images, I shoot for editorial, so I know that's going to be used. More recently, this image is one I donated for free use to the Ocean Agency, who does a lot of conservation work and trying to protect the reefs around the world. And so the World Oceans Day at UN puts on every year, ended up picking on the image. They flipped it around for compositional reasons, but it was kind of nice to know your images are going to help promote ocean conservation. But my favorite place to dive is in British Columbia, by far. I mean, we have big animals, orcas, Pacific dolphins, sea lions. You'll see pictures of divers being very close to them, like this. Now, the government has restrictions now. You can't approach more than 100 meters to a sea lion, but when you're underwater, they just come up to you. As long as you're 100 meters away from the rookery, then you're fine. And they are quite gregarious and unbelievably fun. We have also what they call cloud sponges, and also referred to as glass sponge. So there's a lot of work going on in British Columbia to protect these areas where the sponges grow. They're a couple hundred years old or more. And they're actually within the tubes of these sponges, you will get fish living there, small crabs, crustaceans, shrimp. Use them as like a little condo. We do have large gorgonian coral fans. The trick here is there's only a few places we know of on the coast where they exist, and you have to drop down to about 160 feet to find them. So it's a decompression dive, usually you have to plan. And this particular site, it's pretty much straight up and down. And so we go off on a day trip, and then we end up writing a story about it. And when I shoot for the covers, I'm using some what we call above the diver's head. I leave space for the masthead of a magazine that they can put across there easily. And we call that negative space. But you have to sort of frame your stories, your pictures around that. So up in Queen Charlotte, straight off the north end of Vancouver Island, is one of the most spectacular places on the coast to dive. You can dive right around this little island. It's current swept, so we dive it during what we call slack water intervals, where the current actually stops. And in the bull kelp, we've got these cathedrals of light and marine life and fish. And these are the nurseries on the West Coast where everything small gets to grow bigger. And on the kelp itself, there's all kinds of life forms. These are called brooding anemones. The little anemones at its base will actually detach at some point and start growing their own little brooding anemones. These are hood and nudibranchs, or sea slugs, and you have these population explosions of them, usually in the fall, and then they're gone. You'll see them around as solitary individuals, but not in that profusion. And these are nudibranchs as well, a variety of them. So they're world class. I'd stack them up against anything you find in the tropics. And they're quite large. This is one of the larger ones, called a orange peel nudibranch, larger than your fist. And this is a flame tip nudibranch, or opalescent nudibranch. And this little ribbons here are egg masses. So it's actually laying eggs on this image. And this got published in Norway, of all places. So Um, I've yet to have this translated, but they published the entire story that we sent them, which was great. So in the water column, lots of jellyfish, and the ones on the right with the black background are called Redeye Medusas. They're about the size of a loonie, maybe even smaller. And they just drift through the water column, and quite challenging to photograph because of the movement. But and we'll take these images and then write short little, what I call a creature feature, a little feature about the animal and their life cycle, that sort of thing. And this is what it looks like on the walls up in Browning Passage out of a little distance out of Port Hardy. So I call this tropical splendor in the cold sea. And there's not many places in the tropics that can rival the walls up there when they're so lush. It's called a sea pen, which resembles the old quiver pens of yesteryear. And on the ridges of those, this is an elegant shrimp. And I looked for years because I figured something has to be living on these things and never found anything. And now I find them on about every 6th or 7th one I look at. You'll find some shrimp sometimes on there. There's actually a snail. It's called a ringtop snail. Tricky to photograph the gold and the purple. Like it really is vibrant underwater to see. And these are some of the bigger fish we have. It's called a wolf eel. And they're actually generally quite friendly to divers. We'll often open an urchin for them if they come around. And these fish will chew down on urchins, spines and all. And they just love it. And they have some saliva in their saliva. There's some kind of chemical that will dissolve the spine within a few days. So any spines, they sometimes just see one with a spine coming through its fat lip. That will be gone in short order. Another fish called a decorated war bonnet, so named for the cirri on its forehead, which was supposed to resemble a Plains Indian war bonnet. Very skittish fish. Again, another, you get the image, write a story around it. That one, the magazine contacted me. I posted it on Facebook, and then the editor said, "Hey, would you like to write a few words about it?" So no problem. So this is a place called Browning Wall, and that rock cliff face drops down below the water surface down to about 90 feet, and then cascades down some ridges, and then the center of the channel bottoms out around 300 feet. And in this channel now, we're getting humpback whales swimming through there. So when we come up after a dive now, we sit in the skiff and try to photograph the humpback whales on the surface. But in recent years, since the sea otter population had expanded in this region, they've killed off a lot of the sea urchins, which were killing the kelp. So we have more kelp in the area now. So that means more nurseries. So we've had a fish explosion happening up there, and it's literally impossible on some dives to shoot a fellow diver without fish in between you. And I'm actually about 6 feet away from this diver using a full frame fisheye. And yeah, it's quite spectacular. Again, there's places in the tropics, I would put this up. This was called a clown shrimp. And when I shot this, I was originally going to shoot horizontal just of the shrimp, but I noticed this zoantha behind it, and I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. So I flipped to the vertical and shot it with the idea that this could potentially be a magazine cover. And I was right. The magazine saw it and said, yeah, let's run with that. It's an example of a lot of the colorful fish we have. This is just a small sampling. And this is a juvenile China rockfish. So this is a juvenile color phase, and I'll show you the adult phase. It's absolutely spectacular the way that transitions in time. And one of my favorite fish is a red Irish lord, and their coloration will be from red to yellow. This one's got some pink elements in it, and it tends to reflect whatever their food source is in the area. But extremely colorful, very docile. They'll sit there and allow you to photograph them. I play a game sometimes where I'll just gently put my hand underneath their chin, and I actually can get them in the palm of my hand, and they'll just sit there. So, and sometimes they'll just swim away, but really fun thing to do. This one, predator situation. I wasn't sure if this fish was choking. I actually grabbed the tail and tried to see if it could be dislodged, but the red Irish lord said no. So he was going to digest it. Ended up getting used down in sport diving in Australia as a cover. So they're predators, but just last September, I found one that was being consumed by a green surf anemone in about 10 feet of water. So they sometimes are the prey as well. I've never seen this before. So people say, you know, for all the diving you do in an area and for the years you keep coming back, there's always potential to see something new and different. These are actually different color phases of what's called a fish-eating Telia anemone. And as their name suggests, they do eat fish. And so they catch a fish in their tendrils. They have little nematocysts in their tendrils there, which if you touch with your bare hand, you could actually feel like kind of roughness. And you can always dare somebody to put their tongue on one and they'll get a very tingly sensation. This is the mouth of the anemone. And they can have, like, basically they'll just draw the fish in and swallow it up and then digest it internally. There is one fish in the juvenile phase called a painted greenling or a convict fish. And similar to what you find in the tropics with clownfish that can live in a host anemone, during the juvenile phase, this fish seeks protection from the fish-eating Telia, and they don't get eaten themselves. So again, diving a number of years here before I observed this on a night dive, and I've seen it a few times since, but it does happen and it does exist. The eye of a giant Pacific octopus. Sometimes out in the open, sometimes in a crevice. Highly intelligent. I will not eat octopus. I haven't since I've been diving, really. Because of my earliest encounters with giant Pacific octopus, there's a supreme intelligence there. And you've seen the documentary, maybe My Octopus Teacher. Even though it's a documentary and a little bit, you know, they're pushing the storyline, many of the elements of that story are factual in this of how octopus are. They do remember you if you're around them enough. They love to interact many times, and they have personality. Some are shy, some are more assertive. And unfortunately, they only live about 5 years. So an area called Nectar Rapids up on the mainland side of, just across from Port Hardy. It's a remote area. There's no housing there or anything. But it's known at one time as the Guinness Book of World Records listed as being the strongest saltwater currents in the world. That's since been disputed by another channel here in British Columbia. But it's been the #1 place I've written most of my stories about around the world. People are fascinated by it. And you only get a period of slack water here for between 20 and 40 minutes. The most I've ever had was up almost an hour. And you can actually circumnavigate the island if you have enough time. But invariably, you get in the water, you can feel the current moving still, even though it's slowed. So here's part of a larger tidal exchange. You can see the drop of the water just pushing through this narrow channel, which this little island's right in the middle of it. And these are what they call saltwater rapids. It will calm down during slack. But you can see that how powerful that is. And you'd think nothing could live there. But when it's slack, things settle down, we get in the water. And the reason we go there is these gooseneck barnacles. And they were thought to be only intertidal up until they were discovered here at depths of 40 to 80 feet. And the entire bottom out in the channel is covered with them. We don't know why. But very pretty marine animal. And back early 90s, we were making some forays out into Cayucit Sound, which is a remote inlet off of west coast of Vancouver Island. One of my first stories I did second story I think I did with Diver Magazine here was about sound. And one of the things we looked for a couple trips out there was we had heard stories of First Nation burial sites. So we were going after them to try and find them, one, and also to document them, and also to ensure that the places are kept secret. This particular, there were 3 skulls here, one really well defined, covered in moss. This was an Indian raiding party that had raided the nearby village not too far away while the men were out fishing. So when the men of the village came back and found out the village had been raided by these 3 warriors, they went after them, and in those days they beheaded them. And so they leave them out. Off in the distance, there was a bit of a leftover canoe that they came in. And we keep these areas secret because if somebody finds this, they will take that and put it on their mantle somewhere at home. And we just want to document it for posterity because we know this won't be forever. And I did a sidebar story on it with one of our West Coast stories, and an archaeologist reached out to me through the magazine's editor and just was raving about the story. And all we were trying to do is just document, hey, this is here. It's part of the history of the province, similar to what you find in other parts of the world. But I've always embraced, well, since I began, was really trying to incorporate where possible local cultures, no matter where I am. And that includes First Nations culture here in the West Coast. And they're kind of going through a renaissance now in recognition and tourism, which is fantastic. And so hopefully that continues. Alaska's unknown Titanic of the Pacific. This was the Princess Sophia, or Sophia, some say Sophia. It was used during the war as a transport ship in 1915. And it used to do runs from Skagway down to Vancouver. So passenger vessel. This is where it's laying now. It's sunk on the seafloor. In 1918, it hit a reef in the middle of the channel. They were traveling in a bad snowstorm, very poor visibility. This is the reef they hit. This is at a low tide, and there was no marker on this reef at the time. This is what it looks like at high tide. You cannot see the reef. So they basically went on top of this thing, right on top of it in the middle of the night, and we're stuck there. So there are all kinds of rescue boats came out, wanted to get some of the 343 passengers off. The captain insisted, no, we'll sit here tonight and, everyone's fine. We'll get off tomorrow. Unfortunately, overnight, the ship sank, slipped off the reef into the water. They had breached a large hole in their hull, and everybody died. The only survivor that I'm aware of was a dog that swam ashore. Now, the problem for this accident was this was all of the elite. Many of the passengers were the elite of Alaska's business society. All the millionaires, the people that ran businesses, they were on board and basically almost sank the state for their business overnight. Made worldwide headlines at the time. And it's marked now. There's a marker buoy there for the local dive club. Will make sure it's kind of marked in the channel. And it's possible to dive this wreck. Some people have done it, say it gives them the heebie-jeebies. I didn't feel that at all when I was there. I made about 3 dives on it. I kind of go to these places thinking, well, I'm here just to tell the story, and so they're not forgotten. So I feel I'm somewhat guarded by the souls that may be resting on this wreck. You don't see any bones or anything. They've long disappeared, but the wreck is breaking up. It's falling down on itself, and but you can see how life starts growing on the wreck. A lot of silt and sediment, plates, things that were there at the time. There is marine life. The bluefish at the top corner is called a prowfish. It's the only ones I've ever seen. And this was on the wreck at about 115 feet. So that was kind of fun. The one thing we did, I didn't have a picture here of it, was there was a trunk that we found, a friend of mine. So we went over, looked at it, and they were actually photographic plates. So once we saw where they were, we just put them back, left them where they were. I mentioned it in the story we did. And then I was contacted by the Alaskan museum that wanted to know more about it. And they were very, very interested in this find. So we put them onto where they needed to be and everything. And I think they may have recovered them to try and clean them up. So we did a few stories on that. Again, there are some groups that follow that shipwreck, but many people are not aware of the history. Up in Churchill, Manitoba, Hudson Bay, fabulous place. We went up here, I think this was 2014. We're out with beluga whales. This is before the restrictions came into play where you can't get in, technically can't get in the water with them and you have to maintain a distance. What I've heard they're doing now is they're getting on paddle boards and the photographers are laying down on the paddle board and just dunking their camera over the side of the board. It's quite doable, but it's much nicer to be in the water with them. And they move between the river, the mouth of the river, and out into the bay as the tides change, and then they go back again. They do this all day long, about 3 times a day. So they are absolutely the most fascinating whales I've been underwater with. They have the ability with their neck to nod, and actually had one nod back at me. I've got it on video. I didn't put it in here, but we were nodding and singing through our snorkels and trying to get their attention. And they're intelligent enough to interact with you. And they choose. I mean, they were just close enough you couldn't touch them. And they could swim circles around you, and then they would move off, and then they come back and move away. So these marine mammals choose. They don't follow the regulations, but you can't get in and snorkel right now. It has to be on a paddle board, from what I understand. In Vanuatu, this is a ship that was converted to a troop ship during World War II, an American troop ship. And they actually hit their own landmines. They came down the wrong channel. And just as a radio call went out, stop, they'd hit 2 mines. And the captain quickly pushed the ship up on the edge of the island. And these are the soldiers getting off. So Vanuatu, there it is off of Australia. And the wreck is off Espiritu Santo. And it's the length of 3 football fields, this shipwreck. It's absolutely massive. And they've cut different doors through the side of, or windows in the side of the hull. Much of that was from salvage expeditions during the war. At the end of the war, they were trying to salvage what they could off of it. But we use these portals to basically get inside the ship. It's one of the bow guns. And you still get, it's a machine gun, helmets, down inside 130 feet or so inside the wreck. You can see there's no privacy. They installed all these toilets for the soldiers. Some of the finery from when it was a passenger ship. And this is a artifact called the Lady, and you can see in the middle picture in the background on the wall, that was over a fireplace. So the ship's lying on its side. So the Lady's on its side when you go down there. But again, it's very deep inside the ship. You have to basically know how to dive, what we call an overhead environment. And if you do that, you're going to be fine. The biggest challenge with diving inside shipwrecks such as this is stirring up silt. You have to really be mindful about what your fins are doing or not doing. I'm going to take you to Cat Island in the Bahamas, and 7 miles offshore to be exact. And we go there to snorkel or scuba with oceanic white-tip sharks. They're considered one of the most dangerous sharks in the world. These are the ones that follow ships offshore. They're the ones implicated most in sinkings during the war for attacking sailors in the water and things like that. But they actually they're also they love to bump you. They test things before they will bite or eat. That's part of their lifestyle out in the open sea. So we get in and try to get pictures. This is a buddy of mine, and we were working together, just trying to get each other in the frame. But really a fascinating shark, very shark-like, and intimidating because they will come in so close. And this was the image I was after the whole time, since probably for 30 years. I had this in my head, wanting a shot like this. So I was quite pleased to get it. And another trip we did down in Tahiti off Maria, and the red square there shows where we were snorkeling with humpback whales. So it was a mother and their calf. And Tahiti is, topside. It's absolutely spectacular to look at, and it's your classic South Sea paradise. But one of the unique things we did on this trip was a Fafeti, this double-hulled voyaging canoe. It's built in a traditional style. They have no instruments on board. They sail by navigation using the stars and the sea currents. And the engine they have is solar powered. And basically it's sail power they use to get where they need to go. So in the pontoons of this vessel, the catamaran style, they have a line of bunks in there. I think you could sleep maybe 10 on each pontoon, maybe more. Open deck, the little white building in the middle there, that's kind of the captain's little cabin area, and where they can prepare food and such. We were the first passengers, other than Polynesians, that had been on this as basically a week trip, and really fascinating. Got to steer the canoe by the large rudder there. Before every sailing and every arrival, they do this kind of like a prayer circle to bless the voyage, and also it shows unity among the crew. So the red line there that's about where we were offshore from Maria, where we're out in open water looking for humpback whales. A bit of a view further out. And this is actually a baby humpback whale. And it was only about a month old, but already quite large. And there in the background, you might be able to see the mother just hovering like a submarine there. And she would just allow the baby to swim around us. But if she started to think there's too many people around, or she just didn't feel comfortable, she'd just signal the baby would go under her fluke, and they'd swim away out of sight. The whale whisperer we had with us, who's a local, he would let's just keep going in this direction. He always knew where to find them. So we'd have to snorkel a bit to get there. And some of the time you're just hanging out in the open water like this. We did see Oceanic white-tipped shark out there. We did see dolphins. There are tiger sharks in the area, although we didn't see any. I'm not really concerned about them, but we could just see the bottom in places. Other places we were, depending where the whale was, we were following, you wouldn't have a bottom. So this I'm trying to half in the water, half out of the water shot. And this baby kept coming in closer and closer. And I'm literally trying to back up and trying to frame everything in here. Very mindful that just days before, another group was out, and one of the snorkelers had a broken leg because they got too close and the whale moved its fluke and hit their leg. So, and we don't want to disrupt them, but it was extremely curious, this particular whale. So yeah, fascinating. It's a great experience. I'm going to do it again in a heartbeat when we get a chance. Yeah, just there's nothing like it. An animal, anything that large in the water is something to see. It's up in the Adams River in British Columbia. So we have salmon runs every year, but every fourth year we have a dominant run where there's multiple millions of sockeye salmon that return. And this year in the fall is the dominant year. So we plan to go back up there again. And we get government permits to do this, to get in the water with the salmon. There's some guidelines we follow. But this is the hardest photography to do because you're bracing against this current always coming. So this is Catherine. We're working in very shallow water, but you can see behind her how fast the water is rushing in the middle of the river there. So we're on the fringes of it, trying to catch the salmon mating. This was a kind of a fluky image. I got half into the water, half out, but that reflection, I mean, I could try this 1,000 times and not get the same thing, but just the light, the way it was, everything came together. So it looks massively large compared to that fisherman way in the distance. So don't ask me how, it happened. But in the river itself, while the salmon are mating, many of them are dying, and you can see them piled up in the background there. They just, wherever the back eddies and currents dump them, that's where they end up. Eventually they become nutrients to feed the young salmon that are hatched, as well as along the riverbeds, they'll feed bears. And this bear just came walking down. We're on the other side of this 3-foot creek, and he comes walking down and wanted nothing to do with us, just passing by. And what they were doing was they would get a salmon and eat the head, the brains kind of thing. They were leaving the rest of the meat for the most part. So a bit of a delicacy for them, I guess. But if we get out of the main river area, and this is a very quiet little stream, the challenge here is that the silt is so fine, it will stir up and it'll take several minutes or more for it to settle down. But once you get into the zone, it allows the chance to really get in and get close to the sockeye. And very serene and quiet. This is another one I posted on Facebook, some shots we had from the day before, and the editor contacted me and asked if I had any vertical shots. And I said I did. And so this is what happens. So use social media to put your work out there. This the last bit here is on Tiger Beach in the Bahamas. And you see that marked in the red box there. It's actually a sandbar. The reason it's called Tiger Beach is really to throw fishermen off the trail, so to speak. Because if it became known, and it is known, unfortunately, but commercial fishermen will go out and try to fish these areas. There are restrictions right now in the Bahamas, which we hope they hold. But yeah, it's 26 nautical miles from the West End in the Bahamas, and we get on a shark diving boat like this, early morning, get it out there. They prepare fish crates, basically, we call it chum, but it's really just to get some scent in the water to keep the sharks in the area, keeps them interested. And this is what you see when you arrive. And even with all my shark diving experience, the first time you do this, and you see how many sharks are on the surface, and then down below you got these darker shadows that you know are tiger sharks, and it's only 20 feet of water. It's really kind of, you know, that moment where, we're going to jump into this. And you do. And when you get below, the Caribbean reef sharks are in great numbers there. And they're probably the most ones I'm concerned about, because I wear gloves normally when I'm diving with them, because your hand might look like fish to them, you know, the white flesh. So we try to cover any fleshy parts we can, just not to attract an errant bite from one of them. But generally they're well behaved. They move around you. They don't really bother you. There's a large lemon shark. There's a lot of them in the area, and there's a tiger shark up top there. And this one was resting on the bottom, getting cleaned by, here we are. So it's the same shark. I actually had moved in and had this picture, and then I motioned for the other photographer to come in and get one. And this is what we want in, you know, the dive boats there. It's 20 feet of water. The dimensions are, when we have, I call it owning the seafloor. The shark doesn't have, we take that away from them, the third dimension. The challenge in open water, here we were in a situation shooting 80 feet below us, open water. and the sharks were getting frenzied, and the current picked up on us. And there were 4 of us in the water on a line, all highly experienced, but the sharks just got too frenzied, and one came in, and I had a big one go by me, and that was fine. I turn around, and this one's coming straight at me, opened its mouth, and took my camera housing in its mouth. And I can hear the sound of its teeth hitting the metal on the camera housing. Next to me on the line, Alex Muster is one of the top underwater photographers in the world. He didn't get a picture of this. But I did what I always do in this kind of scenario. Something big coming at me, I'll just hit the shutter. And this shark was at this point within beyond the point of focus. It was inside the zone of focus of my camera and just about ready to open those jaws and clamp down. I remained cool and calm. I basically wasn't going to surrender my camera, even though they said that's what we can do. I thought, well, that's the best defense I have right now. So I wasn't going to give it too easily. So I actually pulled the shark close to me through the water and probably, pulled it close to me. Then I pushed it back through the water column. And then at the last second, I twisted my arm to kind of get it to let go. And it did let go. And then I took the handle of my housing, lurched up off this rope we were hanging on from the boat to, and just slammed its snout as hard as I could. And it kind of snarled and went away. And I was fine, settled down. I didn't have a scratch on me. I bent the handle on my housing. The guy at the end of the line who ran the operation thought the shark had taken my arm or something. He had no idea. He was just out of the zone of visibility. So that's why my preference is to have the seafloor with us, because I feel we have a bit of advantage. Sharks are generally skittish of us. They're very wary. They don't want their eyes touched in any way, because if they lose an eye, that could mean life or death for them. So this is all 3 species of sharks: a tiger, a Caribbean, and a lemon shark together with the shark wrangler. Now, these are the pictures that are sensationalized a bit, where the sharks in here very cooperative with the shark wrangler. They recognize each other. They have since determined they think that sharks can retain memory for up to a year, which would explain why they seem to remember the shark wranglers. But these are the kinds of images we're trying to get, and that's we call benign interactions. Sharks just swimming through the water column, doing what they do. There's a shark wrangler. This is what we want to promote sharks as being, not the Hollywood man-eaters, because they truly are not. So last was this 2020, Jennifer Carter, who was the first woman to ever dive on the Titanic in a submersible. And we became acquainted. She's Explorers Club fellow, and she sent us, I was sourcing a copy of her book. She said, I'll send you one, and sent this along. And the wonderful thing about the Explorers Club has been the friends and the new people we've met over the last few years. And it really is an extraordinary organization. And the outpouring of camaraderie and friendship that builds is second to none in my view. So yeah, that was a real nice thing. And I would have loved to gone on the dive with her back in the mid 80s there. I would have been a younger guy, but certainly would have loved to have done it. And so thank you. That's that wrapped up. Take that off. And we're back.
Round of applause. Thank you, Jett.
Thank you. Any questions or?
I'm still in shock from some of the shark encounters at the end. There was swearing while I was on mute, for sure. Pardon my language.
When I met Catherine, she said she would never dive with sharks, and she was she liked sharks, but she just would never get in the water. She said she didn't want me to get in the water anymore with them. I said, well, that's what I do, so that's not going to happen. But through osmosis, just seeing images like this that I showed, and she'd seen one day, she said, I want to do it. I want to dive with the tiger sharks. She did it, loves it. She'd do it again in a heartbeat. And quite often that's what happens. People are generally, understandably wary at first. They're not sure what they're going to encounter. But once they've experienced this, they come away different. It's changed, for them. They have a whole different appreciation. And I think it's when you see them, how they move underwater, how they interact. There is tiger sharks are actually used a lot in Hollywood movies because they are able to be shark wrangled. They basically will get on one side of the scene and direct the shark into the scene, and then there'll be a shark wrangler on the other side out of camera to kind of catch them on the other side. And they are very bait oriented. As long as you got some bait for them, they'll hang around. So yeah, it's I've dived with sharks all around the world. The biggest challenge when you're going after sharks is that they will come close. Very often they see you and will just swim away. Even in shark-infested waters in the middle of the Pacific Ocean in Micronesia, we got in the water with sharks and tried to set up a shark photography situation, and they waited till we got out of the water before they came in. So I really encourage everyone to give it a chance. If you get a chance, do it.
That was really cool. It's incredible how many places you've been. I'm curious, like if you had to guess how many dives you've been on, or do you log it? Do you have that record?
I've thousands. I did in the early days. Once I started writing, I was too busy taking notes, and keeping a log for me became, just another thing to do. And I was too busy just writing. And at early days with Diver Magazine, in my spare time, I was doing 2 or 3 articles a month for them. And I basically had the chance to write about anything I wanted to write about. So I do a destination piece for them, but I'd also do a product review. I came up with ideas. They always sort of welcome whatever I wanted to do. So I've had this really rarefied kind of existence in the writing area, because I've never had to really work what I would say hard for it, because I approached it as a business, and I would talk to the editors as a business. And the key thing is to deliver on time, always, and just try to tell a good story. And that's my first assignment to Vanuatu. I'm still friends with the former editor, and I said to him, well, what kind of angle do you want me to take on this story? Is there something you want me to bring back? He says, just bring back a great story. And that's what I went with, and had no idea how I was going to do it until I was there. And kind of, when I'm diving, I get inspired and I come up after dive. Oh, that's it. That's how I'm going to start the story. And that's how it works for me. The thing I've learned with other photojournalists is we all do it differently. They all have, there was the editor of the Fisheye View. I was on a trip with him. After every dive, he'd get out of the water, sit down to his Mac and start typing away. And I just couldn't do that. I'd write down some notes, but I tend to do it on reflection when I get home and kind of take it all in and, okay, what do I want to talk about here? And the old, sort of beginning, middle, and an end. And sometimes for me, I either get the ending or I get the beginning, and I'm off. I can just sort of go. And early years, I thought for many times there's going to be an editor who's going to, aha, you're not a writer. You have no training. You have none of this. But I had publishing credits. And after dealing with 50 or more different editors over the years, I've had nothing but kind, glowing reviews and encouragement from them. So you reach a point where you realize you kind of can do this, and I never give it a second thought anymore. I always approach every job that I'm doing with it as, okay, I want to bring back a good story. And I think that if you have that as sort of a guiding light, it works.
When you were talking about, I'm just going to say, your shark dives, Jack and I are avid divers. Jack's an instructor in that, and we were on the Gulf Stream, and there's such a difference between a shark dive and diving and swimming with the sharks, which
Yes.
we did do on a couple of dives. One in particular, it was lemon sharks. They're pretty social and docile. and they come around you and they're curious and so on. But it was one of the most wonderful, memorable dives. We're just hovering around 40 feet of water for as long as we could. It was absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, I agree. At Tiger Beach, the lemon sharks there, I'd be kneeling on the seafloor lining up for a tiger shark, and I'd feel something against my leg, and it was a lemon shark just brushing. You know, they come in so close, they have no sort of approach distance. They just kind of, you're part of the landscape.
Yeah.
And yet lemon sharks, I think I've only read of one ever biting somebody, and it was like in Florida
it's
in murky water. And I think
ever been documented.
Yeah, they had
Nothing
some shiny
serious.
jewelry on and probably thought it was a fish or something. Definitely have never seen any aggression from a lemon shark.
Yeah.
Caribbean reef sharks are just, they just are more excitable. And the time when you're getting in the water at Tiger Beach is, when you get in the water, you have to basically go straight to the bottom. You don't stay on the surface at all. The Caribbean reef sharks won't bother you necessarily, but if they saw something that looked like a fish head or something, they might test with their mouth. What is that? That looks good. And you just don't want to get them excited where they all, you get three of them on you.
Yeah, in a frenzy. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, the rules are pretty straightforward, but I've seen it on a trip where somebody gets in the water and they're basically futzing around on the surface. And it's like, go down or get out, because the tiger sharks are extremely curious and they're always watching. And the last place you want to be with tiger sharks is on the surface, because they will come up and bump you. Yeah. And they will watch you as you're going up, and we keep an eye on them, and they tend to stay down. But if you're hanging around on the surface, they will come up and investigate. Yeah. And you just, ideally don't want to get in that.
You don't want to do that, no.
Yeah.
Wonderful presentation.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, Jett, I second that. Amazing photographs. Really
Thank
great.
you so much.
I have a couple of questions. You mentioned Phil Newton. Yes. George and I made a film with Phil about 10 years ago. And then Brianna and I dove on his Curacao, in Curacao. And when we made the show, we worked with another British Columbia diver, Chris Harvey Clark.
Yes,
and I wondered,
Chris. Yeah.
You and I just wondered if I could get an update about what Phil's up to, what Chris is up to. Do you know?
Chris is on the East Coast now, and I haven't heard from him in a while. I think just recently he had an encounter with a great white shark off Nova Scotia, him and his buddy, as they're coming up the line. So that was a little disconcerting for them at the time. Phil, I haven't seen since we did the Explorers talk. His wife passed away last summer. Unfortunately, I think it was cancer very quickly. But Phil, I've known since the early 90s, mid-90s, and I had never assumed he knew who I was at the time. I was writing for Diver, and I was at Underwater Canada. It used to be a dive show they ran in Toronto. I was presenting there, and I was walking to the elevator, and who's coming the other way to the same elevator but Phil Newton? And it's like, he's like a diving god, like locally. Oh my God, so I introduced myself. He said, of course he knew who I was, and highly complimentary. And so we became acquainted, seen him around, saw him in Chicago at the dive show one year. So when we were doing Explorers Talk, I wanted him if he would come, and he agreed. And I was going to come by. I said, look, I have to go to the aquarium to do like a sound check and check the video and everything. And I'll come by your shop, pick up your video and bring it. And he said, oh no, I'll meet you at the aquarium. And I think, you're busy. You don't have to do that. And I said, I'm happy to come by. He said, no, what time? 8:00. He was right there on time, 8:00. We sat there, went through the stuff. I looked at his video, and it was longer. It was some stock footage he had. So, and he's not very technical on the Mac and things like that. So I talked, do you want me to take it and do some editing? So I just took it and did a quick edit that evening and shared it with him, because we were presenting in 3 days or something. So he put it together, and it just knocked out of the park. He's just such an eloquent speaker, and showed us something old from the 80s, but also something current he was doing in Greece. They're diving a shipwreck over there, and they found one of I can't remember what they call it. It looks almost like an astrolabe, but it's a type of ancient computer almost that the mariners used to use. So they've been trying to unlock the mysteries of that and documenting the shipwreck. So I hear he's doing well. I just haven't seen him. I sent him a note a while ago, but I hadn't heard back. So no doubt he's grieving because he was married since he was, I think, 20. His entire life.
Do you shoot video yourself, or
very little? I plan to do more. It's just it's generally I'm focused on doing it for the magazines or for publishing. So I'm shooting that, and video I'll shoot. Sometimes I'll put a GoPro on top of the housing, just let it run, and then I can edit it down and get some clips that way. But the plan is to do a little more. The challenge with getting into video is if I did it, I'd want to do a little movie. So that's going to take a lot more time and effort to put all that together. But I sure wish I had a lot of stuff I've seen over the years on video, because we didn't capture it on film or on digital. So there's a lot of things. It's the shot you didn't get, but it's in your memory bank. And it's just, if I had a video camera at the time, it would have been great.
I was going to ask that question. Is there a shot you didn't get that you really want to get, or is there somewhere you want to go in the future that you haven't been yet?
Oh, yeah. I've always been torn going back to a place I've been versus going somewhere new. It's and I've had the benefit of both. I would love to do Antarctica diving. Arctic art diving would be fun. We're accustomed to dry suits out here, so it's not much for us to get involved in that. Sharks and whales are always fun. Anywhere, any place, I would do that. I've been really lucky. I've experienced a lot, so there's nothing that I'm thinking, oh, I haven't done that or wish I could do it. It's generally we've been able to make it happen, or definitely sharks are always on the agenda. But yeah, extreme things that haven't been done, like people have dived. I know people have been to Antarctica diving and such, but yeah, I'd like to test that. I'd love to do that myself.
Jett,
yes,
you're very prolific on social media, and I noticed that your photos tend to fall in one of two categories: stunning photography, cocktails. And correct me if I'm wrong.
On Facebook.
Yeah, on Facebook. This explorer's bar that you have at home. Tell me about this, and I would like to know if there are standing invitations for said explorer's bar, because it appears to be quite nice.
Absolutely, it's just a cozy little space we had in the house. It actually was a dining room off the main entrance area, and we really weren't using it as a dining room other than when we had a lot of people over Christmas or something. And we were kind of wondering what we wanted to do with that space. So just before the pandemic hit, we decided, well, let's make it a little bar area. And it's cozy enough. We can't even have bar stools at the bar. We have just four big easy chairs with a table in the middle and the bar behind. And so we put that in, then the pandemic hit. So it was like the timing was wonderful. But we spend a lot of time in there just because I can go in there. All I have in there is behind the bar, we got a radio, CBC, so you can listen to the news while you're working on stuff. But yeah, I've made it kind of famous, I guess, because I post about it or talk about it. And I always say things tongue in cheek. I call our home Stately Britnell Manor. And that's a riff off the old Batman series, Stately Wayne Manor. It's just tongue in cheek thing. And so we called it the Terra Incognita Explorers Bar, just because we name things for fun. And yeah, a lot of people want to come and just have a cocktail.
And plan an expedition.
Yeah.
Sounds like a great place to plan an expedition.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got all those elements to it. But yeah, it's just a cozy corner. And we use that area probably more than any other area in the house other than the kitchen, I guess, right now. Like it's just a nice place to sit in the evening. We have a nice living room area and we can sit out there as well, but it's just right there. We have an open concept, so it's all there. But yeah, it's standing invitation. Anyone who's out. And unfortunately, COVID hit, and times when people have been able to, we're shut down right now and we can't do anything. But we got Michelle Westmoreland down in Seattle there wants to come up, and her and her husband, who we know. And I actually had the chance while I was the regional director in BC, we went to the Seattle club chapters meetings. We got an invitation. Nice. So we went down, met Linda Anaher and other people like that, and Michelle and John All. And, so quite familiar with some of those people. And yeah, locally, definitely it's kind of you've got a standing invitation, that. So just got to make it happen.
Jim, I think you're on mute. Maybe he's not talking to us.
Oh, okay.
I have more of like a technical question. Your photos are so clear, and how do you get there? What are sort of some ways to learn, because you can't just go and practice anytime. You can't just play around with lighting because it's underwater. So what are some sort of tricks or tips to get good at this?
Well, lighting is everything. And one of the tips I would give you is try to be as close to the subject as you can, eliminate the water column as much as you can, because invariably you get fine sediment and if your strobes, how they're positioned, many people point them straight on. I angle them out so that I want the leading edge of the light to come like an angle in the front, so it meets right where the subject is. And I use two strobes. Many photo pros do. But when I'm shooting close up for macro, I tend to use one strobe. And I go for what I call flat lighting. And I learned that from a photo pro back in late 80s. A very famous, world famous guy was on a trip and I interviewed him like when I was starting out. And he told me that's what he did. So I saw how he worked and I tried it and it worked for me. So really it's diving skills, your buoyancy control, and lighting is, some good strobes and how you angle them. Really look at that. And it's trying to just get the edge of the light to hit the subject, not straight on both strobes, because you'll burn it out and introduce a lot of backscatter. So and being in places where there's good visibility too helps. BC, we get good visibility out here, but it goes down with plankton blooms and things like that. So in that time of year, we'll shoot macro or close up more and focus on wide angle when the visibility is much better underwater. So again, choosing the environment a little bit.
Good. Jett, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's like looking at a mirror right now, Jett. I am from British Columbia, you're from BC. We both started in our early teens diving, commercial diving in British Columbia, abalone diving. We both work with Diver Magazine. I think I did about 8 or 9 cover pages. And it's good to see that some of us old fellas can still get in the water and keep up with the young divers. I was really glad to see that, which is good. So I'm glad that you're the president as far as what's going on, and we can talk about some underwater stuff later. If you want to know anything about video, professionally, what we do, I can help you out with that stuff as well.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Appreciate
it. Sorry.
And she's back.
I don't need to see that. Thank you so much. That was amazing. I think I've recovered from my shark shock, and yes, I would not say no to dive with sharks. So thank you. Inspiring us all to overcome that fear, possibly. Jett, you guys all have Jett's email address. We read the emails. I personally know that a lot of us are really excited for some of the plans that you have for the Canadian chapter. And I will be sending out an email shortly. I don't know if I'm allowed to, but I'm going to check if I can send a recording of this to those people who weren't able to attend tonight. We will include, if it's okay with Jett, hopefully invite to the next Ontario Nunavut region meeting in February.
Sure. Yeah.
And who knows where, catch 22, where will 2022 take us, but looking forward to that one for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Joe, for hosting and recording.
Thanks, Joe.
And this was definitely an awesome